we understand that the top 6 states for heroin use are also the top 6 states for tobacco use. Is that causation, correlation? What's going on there?
Yeah, so we, as a department, we collect with a federal grant through the Centers for Disease Control. We collect a youth risk behavior survey, and so we've done that every 2 years for a number of years under the funding. And so this year, as we were looking at the opioid epidemic, we looked at our data, and Kentucky was indeed one of the top 6 states. And so we were just curious about how that crossed over to other risk behaviors, and we're constantly digging at that data and trying to look at our approaches and how to be responsive. And it was a complete lineup with the top 6 states with tobacco use. And so that's another issue that we know we've struggled with in Kentucky. And we work a lot with our public health partners to promote tobacco-free schools and things around that. And so, that we definitely had some concerns that, I think we've seen that in the first segment around the exposure to nicotine early. And so not necessarily causation, but, if we know certain risk behaviors are acceptable in our communities, then obviously there's some concern of what that means for the community at large.
Because we had heard kind of the conventional wisdom was that marijuana was the gateway, and we didn't take it back a step to talk about cigarette or other forms of tobacco use being a gateway to these other more illicit forms of drug use. So that's pretty telling.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and in a state like Kentucky that has a cultural connection to tobacco, that can be very hard to communicate maybe just the health risks, but because there's such a tight connection to tobacco. You're finding that to be a struggle, or how are you overcoming that barrier?
We promote and encourage districts to go beyond federal and state law with tobacco-free policies for schools, and so local board members. And I think sometimes we use that as an excuse that we're a tobacco state. But honestly, North Carolina went tobacco-free schools 7 or 8 years ago. So I think it's time for us to really re-examine what we're doing and the message that it sends to our youth.
Yeah. So let's talk about messaging. What about messaging? And